Hello and welcome to Against the Storm patch 0.63, the Tutorials and Tips update. In this update, we once again get a small amount of new content, mostly focused around the tutorials in the game, as well as the tips system, the system we've gotten bits of in the last couple of updates. And not a whole lot else besides some little balance type stuff and things like that. As we've talked about for the last couple of updates, the game is accelerating, probably at this point, toward 1.0, toward the full release. And so we kind of are getting the final bits now. This is the tutorial system, or improvements to the tutorial system and the guidance system, some of the lore. That's all the last bit that we've been told for quite a while, since the Steam release, or since a midpoint, maybe since the Steam release, anyway, of what the last thing is in the game as far as pre 1.0. So while I don't know when the game's coming out, it's got to be getting close. It's really got to be getting close, and I would imagine sometime before Christmas, just given the fact that we are here in the beginning of November, and we're getting these smaller and smaller updates now for the third time, and they are also focusing on those tiny little tweaks and balances that are just little niggling things as you're playing that you're like, I don't know if I really like that, or that doesn't seem quite in balance compared to this other thing. And so we're getting a lot of those this time. So we're just going to take a look at this update and see what is new here. The first thing is, and we'll go in and actually take a look at this in the game itself, but the first thing is the tutorials are now expanded. We started out with 2 tutorials, one for the basics and one for teaching you how to work with needs and resolve. And they've added 2 more, one for hostility and trade, and another for Rainpunk and Blightrot. These tutorials are all optional. Especially these latter 2 are optional. But if you're a new player to the game, if you've never played the game before, or if you're a fairly new player and you're having a little trouble with these tutorials should help you, help guide you in those areas of the game. And those are some of the more difficult areas of the game to understand. And I have tutorials about those topics too here on my YouTube channel. They may be a little bit out of date. I am planning on updating them for the 1.0 release. And now I think I might be safe to start working on those updates. But I hadn't wanted to do updates to them because I was afraid that I would update just in time for another change to the game and needing to update the tutorial again. So, but these tutorials are in the game, which is in some ways better because then you're actually practicing the thing exactly as sort of scripted or planned by the developers. So you're able to see exactly how it works. But I will hopefully have some updated tutorial videos on some of these topics where the existing video is out of date. So let's go ahead and jump in or continue along and see what else there is here. Beyond this, or next to this, or in addition to this perhaps, once you get into a game with that tutorial system, within that tutorial system, you will get instructional components on how hostility works in the case of the hostility portion of that tutorial, and then you will also get guidance on how the Rainpunk system works in that tutorial. So you can see that the tutorial is going to be fairly interactive and guide you through those systems as you get into them. That's almost all that's new in the game. The other big changes are all balance and some UX UI changes, specifically like these new icons and things for different effects and force mysteries. But they've also moved around several of the force mysteries in terms of when they take effect in your gameplay, in terms of like what level of hostility they take effect, and in some cases what the actual effect is in terms of its difficulty level. So kind of just going over those things. The tutorials, I think that's kind of self-explanatory on how they work, what they're for, what they do, and of course they cover those 4 areas that may be a little bit more difficult to understand as a new player, or for 4 areas that might be more difficult. They may not be the most difficult to understand, but they are probably among the more difficult ones to understand. They're also the ones that are easy enough to explain in a tutorial. Some of the things that are more like min-maxing, those would be a little bit harder to show in a tutorial, but at least the systems themselves are able to be demonstrated well enough. Moving along to the balance changes, they have adjusted the balance of the resources comparing dangerous and forbidden glades. Previously, there was a chance that dangerous glade resources could actually exceed forbidden glade resources, depending on a little bit of RNG and, that type of thing. But they've adjusted it now, so it seems, so that the highest amount of possible dangerous glade resources is still lower than the lowest amount possible of forbidden glade resources, which makes complete sense. You should get more resources by opening a forbidden glade, and you should also get more rewards and or better rewards from solving a forbidden glade event versus a dangerous glade event. So they've adjusted those as well a bit. They also buffed the parts recipe in the Rainpunk Foundry. That's one of those buildings where that you only get randomly in Forbidden Glades, so that it has an additional worker slot so that you can assign more workers and get more stuff made faster in that building. But also they buffed the recipe in the way that it now requires fewer resources and takes less time to craft. So if you have that and you need parts, you can crank them out pretty easily. And at that point, if you have that building, make the parts and sell them with the trader, because they're probably one of those items that's, I'm almost positive, they're one of those items that's worth the trade, worth the make just to trade, that is. Sort of like how trading packs work. I think parts kind of fit the same bill. The rebalance in the Force Mysteries really just moves around, in a lot of cases, the hostility requirement. So something like Unyielding Corruption now triggers after reaching Hostility 3 instead of Hostility 4, so it comes a little bit earlier. Whereas Rotten Rain, which is the one that summons the blood flowers every so often, now spawns blood flowers only every 90 seconds instead of 70 seconds, and also increases the hostility requirement from 3 to 4. So you can see they moved them a little bit back and forth, but Rotten Rain was kind of a bear if you got it. It was a tough one to combat. And if you got it during a prestige run, especially probably as a higher prestige, that would be a little bit tough to do. Yeah, that one makes sense to make those two changes on. Devastating Storms, on the other hand, has been moved down from Hostility 6 to Hostility 5. So, moved up from Hostility to Hostility 6 from Hostility 5. So that's another one that's been made a little bit easier on the player. Node distribution has been tweaked in the marshlands, so eggs should appear a little less often now. That's probably good. We did get a lot of eggs, from what I do recall. Never really thought about it until I read this, but that makes sense, though. And treasure stags no longer have negative perks with negative side effects, which makes sense because it's treasure, so you shouldn't have a disadvantage on top of the advantage of getting it. And there's some new perks that were put in there in the place of the ones that were removed. As I mentioned, there are a bunch of new icons. We saw those on that last screenshot. And they also added a word, proficiency or comfortable, next to each race's specialization name. So you can tell right away whether that particular perk will give the productivity bonus or the happiness bonus, which is really nice to have too. Or the resolve bonus. Happiness and resolve, I guess, are kind of the same thing. Lots of wording changes, some other small tweaks, but that's kind of the extent of the update. Besides that, Aunt Lori will no longer be giving early gameplay tips and basic lore information to veteran players. So I'm glad we went and showed that off as we did in the last couple of updates and that Aunt Lori video that I did separately after the first guidance and lore update. because seeing that stuff, I mean, I guess we could have created a test profile, or actually I have a test profile. We could have done that, but I think it made sense to have it at least for a minute for those of us who hadn't seen it before. But for veteran players from this point forward, you're not going to see it. You're not going to get the option to see it. So if you want to see it, you'll have to go in and create a new profile. And then Aunt Lori's dialogue has been made to sound a little more serious. She did sound a little bit whimsical, so she's a little more serious sounding now. And they added some new opening lines for her, so she's not always greeting you in the same way. So before we go, before we leave this video, I want to just go in and show you the interface for the tutorials. So instead of there being a replay tutorials button here, it's now gone. Instead, you just access the tutorials from this pull-out panel here on the side of your screen. It would almost be nice if we could have an option in the settings to completely hide this panel, because even though you shrink it down and it's tucked away over there, it's still there, and it's still, I don't know. I don't know that a veteran player even needs to know that it's there anymore. So it'd almost be kind of nice to be able to have a UI or an option in the settings to completely hide the tutorials panel. But if not, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So that's kind of just it, though. It tells you which ones you completed. You're obviously able to click the button or click anywhere in the row, really, to access that specific tutorial. I'm not going to do those here as part of this this update notes video, but if you're interested in seeing me go through either or both of these tutorials, you know, over as a matter of course, we could do a special video on each or both of those, depending on how long they are. Let me know that in the comments, or come to my Discord server and tell me there. You can find that link in the description of this video and all of my videos. Otherwise, we're going to leave this here, and we will see you all in the series, which we'll be starting immediately tomorrow as I release this, or perhaps today as you watch this, and join us there to see the next town in our next Prestige attempt. I think I'm still going to stay on Prestige 2, but I may jump up to Prestige 3. So come and see whether I do or not, and come and see what happens in that town. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you all then. Bye for now.